I was making tea when my daughter stopped screaming. For the past 2 hours, little Sophie had been crying about her stomach. She'd wake up from the pain, sob for a while, then drift off again into an uneasy sleep. My wife, Clare, had been sitting with her on the sofa in our small flat in Manchester, stroking her hair and checking her temperature every few minutes. Normal, always normal. No fever, no rash, nothing that would explain why our 8-year-old was curled up like that, clutching her belly and whimpering. I'd called the NHS helpline twice. Both times they told us to monitor her and bring her in if it got worse. But how much worse did it need to get? Sophie wasn't the type to complain about nothing. If she said it hurt, it hurt. The kettle clicked off and I poured the water into my mug, watching the tea bag swirl around. That's when I noticed the silence. Sophie had gone completely quiet. No crying, no whimpering, nothing. "Clare," I called out, leaving the tea on the counter and walking back into our living room. "Is she asleep?" Clare was standing up, backing away from the sofa. Her face had gone pale. "Thomas," she said quietly. "Thomas, look at her eyes." I moved closer and saw Sophie sitting upright, her small body perfectly still. She was staring straight ahead at nothing, and her eyes, God, her eyes looked wrong. They were dark, too dark, like all the color had been sucked out of them and replaced with something black and oily. The light from the lamp caught them, and they seemed to shimmer, reflecting it back in a way that made my skin crawl. "Sophie, sweetheart," I said, kneeling down in front of her. "Can you hear me?" She didn't respond, didn't even blink, just sat there staring with those horrible black eyes. Claire's hand found mine and squeezed hard. "What's wrong with her? Thomas, what's happening?" Before I could answer, both our phones started screaming. Not ringing, screaming. It was a sound I'd never heard before, this awful wailing noise that seemed to drill straight into my skull. I fumbled for my phone in my pocket, and Clare grabbed hers from the coffee table. The screen was flashing red, bright enough to hurt my eyes in the dim room. Emergency alert. Mandatory quarantine. A biological contamination has been detected in Greater Manchester and surrounding areas. All residents must shelter in place immediately. Do not leave your homes under any circumstances. Do not approach anyone showing unusual symptoms. Warning signs include blackened eyes, loss of speech, violent behavior, and extreme food cravings. If anyone in your household shows these symptoms, ring 999 immediately. Do not travel to hospitals or GP surgeries. Medical response teams will come to you. This is not a test. Stay indoors. Help is coming. My hands went numb. I read it again, then a third time, trying to make sense of the words. Biological contamination? In Manchester? That didn't happen here. That happened in films. In other countries, not in bloody Manchester on a Tuesday evening. "Did you see it?" Clare whispered, her voice shaking. "Yeah," I said, looking back at Sophie. She still hadn't moved. Those black eyes were fixed on something I couldn't see. "Yeah, I saw it." "We need to call them right now," Clare said, already dialing 999. "She's got the symptoms. The black eyes, she's not talking. We need to call them." Sophie's head turned slowly toward us, and I swear to God it looked like someone was moving it for her, like she was a doll being positioned. Her mouth opened. "Hungry," she said, and her voice was all wrong. It was too deep, too rough, like gravel being scraped across metal. "So hungry, Daddy." Clare made a small choking sound and pressed the phone to her ear. Come on, pick up," she muttered. Sophie stood up from the sofa, and she did it in one smooth motion without using her hands, just rose straight up like she was being pulled by strings. She took a step toward us, then another, her movements jerky and unnatural. "Where's the food?" she asked in that horrible voice. "Need to eat. Need it now." "Sophie, love, sit back down," I said, holding my hands out toward her. "You're not well." Just sit down and... Someone answered Claire's call. I could hear a woman's voice coming through the phone, tinny and distant. Emergency services, what's your emergency? My daughter, Claire said quickly, the words tumbling out. She's got the symptoms from the alert. The black eyes, she's talking strange. She's saying she's hungry. We're at 14 Ashford Road, Withington, please. We need help. Ma'am, listen carefully, the operator said, and I could hear the strain in her voice even from where I stood. You need to keep your distance from her, at least 3 meters. Do not let her touch you. A medical team is being dispatched to your location, but it may take some time. We're dealing with multiple cases. Do you have a room you can secure her in? Secure her? Claire's voice cracked. She's 8 years old. She's our daughter. What do you mean secure her? Ma'am, for your safety and hers, you need to keep her contained until help arrives. Lock away all food in your home. Do not give her anything to eat. Do you understand? Why? I asked loudly. Why can't she eat? There was a pause. Just follow the instructions, sir. Keep your distance and wait for the medical team. They'll be wearing protective suits. Don't open the door for anyone else. The line went dead. Sophie was moving toward the kitchen now, her steps getting faster. I ran after her and grabbed her arm, and the moment I touched her, she spun around and hissed at me. Actually hissed, like a cat. Her teeth looked sharper than they should have been, and when she opened her mouth, I could see her tongue had gone dark, almost black. Let go, she shrieked, and her voice went so high it didn't sound human anymore. She clawed at my hand with her fingernails, and I felt them dig into my skin, drawing blood. The pain was sharp and sudden, and I almost let go, but I held on. Claire, help me, I shouted. Together we wrestled Sophie away from the kitchen. She was fighting us with strength that shouldn't have been possible for a child her size. She twisted and thrashed, snapping her teeth at us, those black eyes wild and unfocused. We managed to get her back to the living room, and I pushed her down onto the sofa. Get something to tie her with, I said to Claire, pressing down on Sophie's shoulders as she bucked and screamed beneath me. Quickly! Claire ran to the bedroom and came back with a handful of belts and some packing tape we'd never gotten around to throwing away after our last move. My arms were shaking from the effort of holding Sophie down. She was so strong, impossibly strong, and she kept trying to bite me, her teeth snapping inches from my face. We worked fast, looping the belts around her wrists and ankles and securing them to the sofa legs with the tape. Sophie screamed the whole time, a horrible sound that went on until my ears were ringing. When we finished, we both stumbled backward, gasping for air. Sophie strained against the restraints, her whole body pulling toward the kitchen. Food, she kept saying over and over like a broken record. Need food, have to eat, starving. Please, please let me eat. I looked at the clock on the wall. We'd called emergency services maybe 10 minutes ago. How long would it take for them to get here? An hour? 2 hours? How long could we keep her like this? Outside, I heard sirens, lots of them, coming from every direction. Through our window, I could see blue lights flashing against the building across the street. There were people running, shouting. A woman's scream cut through the air, then was suddenly silenced. Claire gripped my arm, her fingernails digging in. What's happening out there? I don't know, I said, but that wasn't quite true. If Sophie had these symptoms, how many other children in Manchester had them too? How many other parents were calling 999 right now, watching their kids turn into something else? Sophie stopped struggling. She went completely still, her head hanging forward, her dark hair covering her face. For just a second, I thought maybe it was over, that whatever had hold of her had let go. Then she lifted her head and looked straight at us. She smiled, and it wasn't my daughter's smile. It was something cruel and hungry wearing her face. They're coming, she said in that deep, wrong voice. All of them, coming to feed, and you can't stop us. A crash came from somewhere outside, followed by more screaming. The sirens were getting louder, closer. I moved to the window and looked out, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Children, dozens of them, pouring out of the surrounding buildings and into the street. They all had those same black eyes, and they were moving together like a pack, hunting. The children moved like wolves, heads down, bodies low to the ground. Some were running on all fours, their hands and feet slapping against the wet pavement. Others walked upright, but hunched over, their arms hanging loose at their sides. Every single one of them had those black, oil-slick eyes that caught the streetlights and threw the glow back in sickening flashes. I watched as a little boy, couldn't have been more than 5, tackled a man who was trying to get to his car. The man went down hard and 3 other children swarmed him. I couldn't see what they were doing to him, but I heard his screams, and then I heard them stop very suddenly. "Thomas, get away from the window," Claire said, her voice tight with panic. She was standing frozen in the middle of our living room, her eyes darting between me and Sophie, who was still strapped to the sofa, still smiling that horrible smile. "There's so many of them," I said, unable to look away. "Claire, there must be 30, 40 kids out there, maybe more." A police car came tearing down the street, its sirens wailing, and slammed on the brakes in front of our building. 2 officers jumped out, and I could see them shouting into their radios. One of them had his baton out. The other was reaching for something on his belt. The children turned toward them as one, like a flock of birds changing direction. They moved in perfect synchronization, and there was something deeply wrong about it, something that made my stomach turn over. "Get back in the car!" I shouted at the window, knowing they couldn't hear me. "Get back in the bloody car!" They didn't. The first wave of children hit them hard and fast. I saw the officer with the baton go down, saw him trying to fight them off, but there were too many. The other officer managed to get back to the car, but a teenage girl grabbed his leg and pulled him down. His screams joined the chorus of sounds coming from outside. "Oh, God," Claire whispered. "Oh, God, Thomas, they're killing them." I forced myself to turn away from the window. Claire was right. Standing here watching wasn't going to help anyone, least of all us. I grabbed my phone and tried to call 999 again, but the line was busy, just a continuous engaged tone. I tried 3 more times. Same thing. "They're not answering," I said, feeling my chest tighten. "The emergency line, they're not answering." Sophie laughed. It was a low, bubbling sound that came from deep in her throat. "Too many calls," she said in that wrong voice. "Too many hungry children. Not enough people to help. Not enough people to feed." "Shut up," I snapped at her, and immediately felt terrible. This was my daughter, my little girl who loved drawing and hated broccoli and still slept with her stuffed rabbit every night. This wasn't her. This was something else, something that had gotten inside her. Claire moved to the window, careful to stay to the side where she couldn't be seen from outside. "The street's full of them now," she said. "Thomas, what are we going to do? The medical team, they said they were coming, but how are they supposed to get through that?" She was right. The street below was chaos. More children were emerging from buildings, from alleyways, from between parked cars. They were all moving in the same direction now, flowing like a dark river towards something I couldn't see. Their numbers were growing every minute. A woman burst out of the building across from us, dragging a small boy by the hand. He looked normal, no black eyes, and he was crying. The woman was shouting something, and I could see the desperation in her movements as she tried to get him to her car. "Don't," I whispered. "Don't go out there." But she did. She pulled the boy across the street, running as fast as she could. For a moment, I thought they might make it. Then one of the infected children noticed them, then another, then all of them. The woman saw them coming and screamed, picking up the boy and running faster. She made it to her car, fumbled with her keys, got the door open. The boy was halfway inside when the first infected child reached them. I turned away. I couldn't watch. but I could still hear the woman screaming, and I could hear the boy crying for his mum, and then I couldn't hear them anymore. Claire's hand found mine again, and we stood there in our living room, in our safe little flat that suddenly didn't feel safe at all, listening to the sounds of our neighborhood tearing itself apart. "We need to do something," Claire said. "We can't just stand here." "What can we do?" I asked. "We go out there. We die. We stay here. I looked at Sophie, still strapped to our sofa, still smiling. "What if more of them come here? What if they try to get inside?" As if in answer, something heavy slammed against our front door. We both jumped, and Claire let out a small scream. Another impact, then another. Someone was trying to break in. "The bedroom," I said, grabbing Claire's arm. "We can lock ourselves in the bedroom." "What about Sophie?" Claire asked, her eyes filling with tears. "We can't just leave her here." "She's tied down. She's not going anywhere," I said, hating myself for saying it. "Claire, we have to move now." The door shook again, and I heard wood starting to splinter. Whatever was on the other side was strong, much stronger than a person should be. "No," Claire said, pulling away from me. "No, I'm not leaving her. She's our daughter, Thomas. I don't care what's wrong with her. I'm not abandoning her." The door frame cracked, and I saw fingers pushing through the gap, small fingers with black nails that looked sharp as glass. A child's face appeared in the opening, a little boy with curly hair and black eyes, and he was grinning at us with teeth that had grown too long for his mouth. "We need to block the door," I said, looking around frantically. "Help me move the bookshelf." We grabbed the heavy bookshelf against the wall and dragged it across the floor, books tumbling off the shelves and hitting the ground with heavy thuds. We managed to wedge it against the door, just as it burst open, the lock giving way completely. The boy tried to push through, but the bookshelf held. For now, more children were gathering outside. I could hear them, could see their shadows moving in the hallway through the gap above the bookshelf. They were hissing and snarling, and they were trying to find a way in. "The windows," Claire said suddenly. "Thomas, what if they come through the windows?" I ran to our living room window and looked down. We were on the 3rd floor, thank God, but I could see some of the older children looking up at the buildings, pointing. One of them started climbing the drain pipe of the building next to ours. "Close the curtains," I said. "All of them. Don't let them see us." We rushed around the flat, closing every curtain, every blind, plunging ourselves into semi-darkness. The only light came from the lamp in the corner, casting long shadows across the walls. Sophie was laughing again, that horrible bubbling laugh. "They know you're here," she sang out. "They can smell you, smell your fear, smell your meat." "Stop it," Claire sobbed. "Sophie, please stop it." But Sophie didn't stop. She kept laughing and laughing, and outside the sounds of breaking glass and screaming grew louder. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump. I pulled it out and saw a text message from an unknown number. "Emergency update. Military lockdown in effect. Stay indoors. Do not open doors or windows. Lethal force authorized against infected individuals. Rescue operations suspended until situation contained." "They're not coming," I said, my voice hollow. "Claire, they're not coming to help us." Claire slid down the wall and sat on the floor, her face in her hands. "What are we going to do?" I didn't have an answer. All I could do was stand there, listening to the children gathering outside our door, listening to my daughter laughing in the darkness, and wonder how long it would be before they found a way inside. The banging on the door stopped suddenly, and that was somehow worse than the noise. The silence pressed in on us, heavy and thick, broken only by Sophie's quiet humming and the distant sounds of chaos from the streets below. I helped Claire up from the floor, and we moved to the center of the room, as far from the door and windows as we could get. My mind was racing, trying to think of a way out, but every option seemed to end with us dead or worse. "Maybe they've gone," Claire whispered, her voice fragile with hope. I shook my head. "They wouldn't just leave. They're waiting for something." Sophie's humming stopped. "They're not waiting," she said, her head tilting at that unnatural angle again. "They're listening, hearing where you are, feeling the vibrations when you move. They know exactly where you're standing." "How does she know that?" Claire asked, grabbing my arm. "Thomas, how does she know what they're doing?" Before I could answer, I heard a new sound. Scratching. It was coming from above us, from the ceiling. Light at first, like fingernails on wood, then heavier, more insistent. They were on the roof. "Jesus Christ," I breathed, looking up. "They're on the bloody roof." The scratching moved across the ceiling, following the layout of our flat. I could track their movement by the sound. They were looking for a way in, testing the structure, finding the weak points. Claire's phone rang, the sound so sudden and loud in the quiet that we both jumped. She fumbled for it, nearly dropped it, then managed to answer. "Hello? Hello? Who is this?" I could hear a man's voice on the other end, speaking quickly. Claire's face went pale as she listened. Yes, we're at 14 Ashford Road, flat 3C. We called earlier. My daughter has the symptoms. There are infected children outside. They're trying to get in. When can you—" She stopped, listening. "What do you mean you can't? You have to help us." The voice on the other end was apologetic but firm. I moved closer, trying to hear what he was saying. "Understand your situation, ma'am, but all medical teams have been pulled back. The infection rate is too high. The entire Greater Manchester area is under military quarantine. Nobody goes in or out. I'm sorry, but you're on your own until this is contained." "We have a child here," Claire screamed into the phone. "She's 8 years old. You can't just abandon us." "Ma'am, you need to understand what you're dealing with. The infected children are extremely dangerous. They're stronger than normal, faster, and they hunt in packs. If you have one in your home, even if it's your own child, you need to stay away from it. Do not untie it. Do not try to feed it. And whatever you do, do not let it bite you." "Why?" I asked loudly. "What happens if we get bitten?" There was a long pause. "You become one of them. The transformation takes about 20 minutes. Once it starts, there's no stopping it. I'm sorry. I truly am. But you need to barricade yourselves in and wait this out. The military is working on a solution." The line went dead. Claire lowered the phone slowly, her hand shaking. "They're not coming," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Thomas, they're not coming for us." The scratching above us intensified, and I heard the sound of tiles being torn away. Dust began to fall from the ceiling, little streams of it catching the lamplight. "They're breaking through," I said, looking around desperately for something, anything we could use as a weapon. "Claire, the kitchen, grab knives, anything sharp." We ran to the kitchen together, pulling open drawers and grabbing whatever we could find. I took the largest knife we had, a heavy chef's knife that Claire used for cutting meat. Claire grabbed a smaller paring knife and a rolling pin. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Sophie was laughing again, watching us from the sofa. "You think those will help? You think you can fight them? There are so many, Daddy, so many hungry children, and they're so much stronger than you." A section of the ceiling collapsed, sending chunks of plaster crashing down onto our floor. I saw movement in the hole, glimpses of small bodies moving in the crawl space above. Then a face appeared, looking down at us. A girl, maybe 10 years old, with blonde hair matted with dirt and those terrible black eyes. She smiled at us, and then she dropped through the hole. She landed on our coffee table, shattering it, but she didn't seem hurt at all. She straightened up, glass crunching under her feet, and took a step toward us. "Get back!" I shouted, raising the knife. "Stay back or I'll—" She moved so fast I barely saw her. 1 second she was standing by the broken table. The next she was right in front of me, her hand clamped around my wrist. Her grip was like iron, impossibly strong for a child her size. She twisted my wrist and I felt something pop, pain shooting up my arm. The knife clattered to the floor. Claire screamed and swung the rolling pin at the girl's head. It connected with a solid thunk, and the girl staggered sideways, but she didn't go down. She turned to look at Claire, blood trickling from her temple, and hissed. More children were dropping through the hole in the ceiling now. A boy in pajamas, another girl in a school uniform, a teenager in football kit. They landed and immediately spread out, surrounding us. "The bedroom!" I yelled, grabbing Claire with my good hand and pulling her toward the hallway. "Run!" We ran, the children right behind us. I could hear their feet on the floor, could hear their breathing, wet and ragged. We made it to the bedroom and I slammed the door shut, throwing my weight against it as the first child crashed into it from the other side. "The dresser!" I shouted at Claire. "Help me block it!" Together we shoved the heavy wooden dresser in front of the door, and not a moment too soon. The impacts came hard and fast, the door shaking in its frame. I could see it bending inward, the wood starting to crack. "It won't hold," Claire sobbed. "Thomas, it won't hold." She was right. The door was already splintering, fingers pushing through the gaps, reaching for us. We backed away, pressed against the far wall with nowhere left to go. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Emergency update. Infection spread accelerating. Estimated 70% of children in Manchester affected. Adults now showing symptoms. If you have been bitten or scratched, seek shelter immediately. Transformation imminent. God, help us all. I looked down at my hand, at the scratches Sophie had given me when we first restrained her. They were deeper than I'd thought, and the skin around them looked dark, like bruises spreading from the wounds. "Claire," I said quietly. "Claire, look at my hand." She looked, and I saw the realization hit her like a physical blow. "No," she whispered. "No, Thomas, no." The scratches were turning black, the darkness spreading up my arm like ink in water. I could feel it too, a coldness moving through my veins, and underneath that, a growing, gnawing hunger that made my mouth water. The bedroom door finally gave way, crashing inward and sending the dresser sliding across the floor. The children poured in, and standing behind them, I could see Sophie. She'd somehow gotten free of her restraints. She was smiling at us, and in the dim light I could see that her teeth had grown even longer, sharper. "It's okay, Daddy," she said in that horrible voice. "It won't hurt much, and then you'll be hungry like us. We can feed together." Claire grabbed the knife I'd dropped and held it out in front of her, her hands shaking so badly the blade caught the light in frantic flashes. The children moved into our bedroom slowly, deliberately, like they were savoring the moment. Sophie stayed at the back, watching us with those black eyes, still smiling. "Stay away from us!" Claire screamed, her voice cracking with desperation. "I'll use this. I swear to God I'll use it." The girl who'd dropped through the ceiling first tilted her head, studying Claire like she was something curious and new. Then she laughed, and the other children joined in, their voices mixing into something that barely sounded human. I looked down at my arm again. The darkness had spread past my elbow now, creeping up toward my shoulder. The cold was getting worse, but underneath it, something else was building. A heat, a hunger. My stomach cramped, and suddenly all I could think about was food. Not just food. Meat. Fresh meat. The smell of Claire next to me was overwhelming. Copper and salt and something sweet underneath. "Thomas?" Claire said, and I realized I'd been staring at her neck. "Thomas, what's wrong?" "Nothing," I said, but my voice came out wrong, deeper than it should have been. I coughed, trying to clear my throat. I'm fine. We need to... What did we need to do? My thoughts were getting fuzzy around the edges, harder to hold on to. There was something important I was supposed to remember, but the hunger was making it difficult to think. The window. We had a window in the bedroom. Claire, I managed to say, forcing the words out. The window. We're 3 floors up, but maybe we can climb down somehow. The drain pipe or... And go where? She asked, tears streaming down her face. Thomas, look outside. Look. I moved to the window, keeping my eyes on the children who were still just watching us, waiting. I pulled the curtain aside and looked down at the street below. It was worse than before. So much worse. The street was filled with infected children, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They were swarming over everything, pulling people from their homes, dragging them into the street. I saw a man trying to fight them off with a cricket bat. He managed to hit one, then another, but there were too many. They overwhelmed him, and I had to look away. We can't go out there, I said. The hunger was getting stronger. My teeth felt strange, like they were shifting in my mouth. We have to... Daddy's changing, Sophie said happily from the doorway. Can't you see it? His eyes are going dark. Soon he'll be like us. Soon he'll understand how good it feels to feed. Shut up, Claire shrieked, and she threw the rolling pin at Sophie. It hit her in the chest, but Sophie just laughed and picked it up, turning it over in her hands like it was a toy. I could feel it happening now. The transformation. It was like something was unraveling inside me, all the parts that made me human coming loose. The hunger was overwhelming everything else, drowning out my thoughts, my memories, my love for Claire and Sophie. All that mattered was the hunger and the need to feed. Claire, I said, and I barely recognized my own voice. Claire, you need to lock me out. Lock me in the bathroom or tie me up like we did with Sophie. Please, before it's too late. No, she said, shaking her head frantically. No, I can't. Thomas, I can't do that to you. You have to, I said, but it was getting harder to care. Claire smelled so good. I could hear her heart beating, fast and panicked, pumping blood through her body. Fresh, warm blood. My mouth was watering. Please, while I still... The blonde girl lunged at Claire suddenly, and Claire swung the knife without thinking. It caught the girl in the shoulder, and she screamed, but it didn't sound like pain. It sounded like rage. Black blood oozed from the wound, thick and viscous, nothing like normal blood. The girl grabbed Claire's wrist and twisted, just like she'd done to me. Claire cried out and dropped the knife. The other children moved in, surrounding her, and I knew I should help her. I knew I should do something, but the hunger was singing in my veins, and part of me, a growing part, wanted to join them. Thomas! Claire screamed my name as the children grabbed her arms. Thomas, help me! I took a step toward her, then stopped. My vision was starting to go dark around the edges, everything taking on a black tint. I could see better somehow, like the darkness was lifting instead of falling. I could see every detail of Claire's face, the terror in her eyes, the pulse jumping in her throat. Fight it, I whispered to myself. Fight it, you bastard. That's your wife. That's Claire. But who was Claire? The name meant something. I knew it did, but I couldn't quite remember what. The woman in front of me smelled like food, like prey. That's all she was. That's all any of them were. No, that wasn't right. I shook my head, trying to clear it, trying to hold on to who I was. I'm Thomas. Thomas Wright. I'm 34 years old. I'm a teacher. I have a wife named Claire and a daughter named Sophie. I love them. I love them more than anything. The children dragged Claire toward the bed, and she was fighting them, kicking and screaming. But they were too strong. Sophie walked over to her, reaching out with those sharp-nailed fingers. It's okay, Mummy, Sophie said. It won't hurt for long. And then we can all be together again. A proper family. Something in those words cut through the fog in my mind. Family. We were a family. I couldn't let them hurt Claire. I couldn't. I threw myself at the children, shoving them away from Claire. They scattered, hissing and snarling, and Claire scrambled off the bed and ran for the door. I tried to follow her, but the blonde girl jumped on my back, her teeth sinking into my shoulder. The pain was sharp and bright, cutting through everything else. "Go!" I screamed at Claire. "Get out! Run!" Claire hesitated in the doorway, her face torn with anguish. "I can't leave you." "I'm already gone," I shouted, feeling the last threads of my humanity starting to fray. The black was spreading across my vision now, and the hunger was all I could feel. "Please, go, now!" She ran. I heard her footsteps in the hallway, heard the front door crash open. The children started to follow her, but I grabbed the nearest one and held on, keeping them back for just a few more seconds, giving Claire time. Sophie was the only one who didn't chase after Claire. She stayed with me, watching as I fell to my knees as the transformation completed. The darkness swallowed my vision entirely, and when I could see again, everything looked different, sharper, clearer. And I was so hungry. "There you are, Daddy," Sophie said, kneeling down next to me. "I knew you'd come back to us." She was right. I wasn't Thomas anymore. Thomas was gone, buried under the hunger and the darkness. I was something else now, something that needed to feed. I stood up, and Sophie took my hand. Together we walked out of the bedroom, following the scent of prey, following the woman who used to be my wife. Outside, the night was full of screaming and the sounds of feeding. Manchester was falling, block by block, street by street. And we were part of it now, Sophie and I, part of the swarm. We found Claire 3 buildings down. She'd tried to hide in someone's flat, but we could smell her fear, could hear her heart pounding. The door was locked, but that didn't matter. Nothing could keep us out. Sophie smiled at me, and I smiled back. Then we began to feed. The feeding frenzy lasted hours, or maybe it was minutes. Time didn't work the same way anymore. All that existed was the hunger, the hunt, and the sweet satisfaction of tearing into warm flesh. Sophie and I moved through the building together, finding anyone who'd tried to hide, anyone who thought they could escape. Nobody escaped. But then something changed. The hunger started to fade, just a little, and with it came something else. Memories, flashes of a life that seemed distant and unreal. A woman's face. Claire. Her name was Clare. She'd been smiling at me, saying something I couldn't quite hear. Then the memory shifted, and she was screaming, her hands up to protect herself as Sophie and I... No, that couldn't be right. That couldn't have happened. I looked down at my hands. They were covered in blood, dark and sticky, drying under my fingernails. My clothes were soaked with it, and the smell... God, the smell of copper and meat made my stomach turn. "Daddy?" Sophie's voice cut through the fog. She was standing a few feet away, and for the first time since this started, she looked uncertain. Her black eyes were still there, but something in them had changed. "Daddy, what did we do?" The question hit me like a physical blow. What did we do? I looked around the flat where we'd cornered Claire. The walls were painted red. There were torn pieces of clothing on the floor. A shoe. A watch I recognized because I'd given it to her for our anniversary. "Oh God," I whispered, and my voice cracked. "Oh God, Claire. Claire, I'm so sorry." I fell to my knees, and the weight of what I'd done crashed down on me all at once. I'd killed my wife. I'd hunted her down with my daughter, and I'd killed her, torn her apart, fed on her. The memory of it was coming back now, sharp and clear and horrible. I could remember the taste. I could remember enjoying it, No, 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 I kept saying, rocking back and forth. This isn't real. This can't be real. But it was. It was all too real. The blood on my hands was real. The remains scattered across the floor were real. What I'd become was real. Sophie was crying now, proper crying, tears streaming down her face as she stared at what we'd done. I couldn't stop, she sobbed. Daddy, I couldn't stop. I wanted to, but I couldn't. What's wrong with us? I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that for a brief time, whatever had taken control of us was loosening its grip. We were ourselves again, at least partially. And that meant we could understand the horror of what we'd done. Outside, the sounds of chaos were dying down. The screaming had stopped. The sirens had gone quiet. I moved to the window and looked out at Manchester, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The streets were empty, not deserted, but filled with infected children standing perfectly still, like they were waiting for something. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all frozen in place. Their black eyes were turned upward, toward the sky, and they were all standing in complete silence. What are they doing? Sophie asked, moving up beside me. Her voice was small and frightened, my daughter's voice again. I don't know, I said. Then I heard it, a low humming sound, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was getting louder, making my teeth ache, making my bones vibrate. The infected children below began to sway in unison, like grass in a wind. A bright light appeared in the sky, harsh and white, and I had to shield my eyes. Military helicopters were moving in formation overhead, at least a dozen of them, but they weren't landing. They were just hovering there, and I could see people in the open doors, people in hazmat suits pointing strange devices at the ground below. Attention infected individuals, a voice boomed from loudspeakers on the helicopters. This is a military quarantine zone. The infection must be contained. You are ordered to remain still. Any movement will be met with lethal force. Gunfire erupted from the helicopters, and I watched in horror as the soldiers began shooting the infected children in the streets below. Not with regular bullets. These were making the children explode in bursts of black liquid, their bodies dissolving into nothing within seconds. Some kind of chemical weapon. They're killing them, Sophie whispered. Daddy, they're killing all of them. More helicopters appeared, sweeping across the city in a grid pattern. The infected children tried to run, tried to scatter, but there were too many helicopters, too many guns. Wherever they ran, the chemical weapons found them. The streets were turning black with dissolved bodies. We have to hide, I said, grabbing Sophie's hand. We have to... A spotlight hit our window, blinding white light flooding the room. I heard the helicopter moving closer, heard the whoop-whoop-whoop of the rotors. Infected individuals detected in Building 7, 3rd floor, a voice crackled over the radio. Prepare to engage. I pulled Sophie away from the window and we ran into the hallway. Other infected were emerging from flats now, confused and disoriented, some of them seeming to regain consciousness like we had. A teenage boy was crying, looking at his blood-covered hands in horror. A little girl was calling for her mom, who wasn't answering. The building shook as something hit it. An explosion. They were bombing us, actually bombing civilian buildings to contain the infection. The basement, someone shouted. An older boy, maybe 15, his black eyes starting to clear. We need to get to the basement. It's the only place they might not reach. We ran for the stairs, dozens of infected children all heading down together. Behind us, I could hear the building starting to collapse, walls cracking and ceiling tiles falling. The helicopters were relentless, their weapons tearing through the structure. We made it to the basement just as another explosion rocked the building. The lights went out, plunging us into darkness. Sophie was still holding my hand, squeezing so tight it hurt. Around us, I could hear other children breathing, crying, whimpering in fear. Is everyone okay? I asked into the darkness. A few voices answered. Maybe 20 children had made it down here. 20 out of how many thousands? How many had already been killed? How many were still being killed right now? What do we do? A girl's voice asked. What are we supposed to do? I didn't know. I didn't have an answer. We were infected, we were dangerous, and we'd done terrible things. But we were also conscious again, aware again. Did that matter? Would anyone care? Or were we all just going to die down here when the building came down on top of us? The explosions continued overhead, each one closer than the last. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling. Someone was praying, their voice shaking. Someone else was singing softly, a lullaby I recognized from when Sophie was younger. Sophie pressed close to me, and I wrapped my arms around her, trying to shield her from the falling debris, even though I knew it was pointless. If the building came down, we'd all die together. I'm sorry, baby, I whispered into her hair. I'm so sorry for everything. I know, Daddy, she said. I'm sorry, too. The ceiling above us groaned, and I heard the sound of metal twisting. This was it. This was how it ended. Not as humans, but as monsters hiding in the dark, waiting to be crushed or dissolved or burned alive. But then the explosion stopped. The building settled with a final shudder, but it held. We were still alive. In the silence that followed, I heard something new. Footsteps. Heavy boots on concrete. Moving closer to the basement door. Someone was coming, and I had a feeling it wasn't to rescue us. Stay quiet, I whispered to the others. Don't move. Don't make a sound. The door to the basement rattled. Someone was trying the handle. It was locked, but I didn't think that would stop them for long. The door handle rattled again, more insistent this time. Then came the sound of something heavy being positioned against the door. A battering ram, maybe, or some kind of breaching tool. We all held our breath in the darkness. 20 terrified children and one father who'd become a monster. Thermal scans confirm multiple heat signatures, a muffled voice said from the other side. Could be survivors or infected. Protocol requires we check before we bring the building down. My heart jumped. Survivors. They thought we might be survivors. Maybe we could explain. Maybe we could make them understand that we were conscious again, that we weren't mindless killers anymore. Maybe there was still hope. Wait, I called out. Wait, don't shoot. We're not hostile. We have children in here. The sounds outside stopped. There was a long pause. Then a different voice spoke, closer to the door. Sir, are you infected? The voice was cautious, professional. Be honest. We can tell if you're lying. I looked around at the children huddled in the darkness. Their eyes were still black, still wrong. So were mine, I was certain. Sophie was pressed against me, trembling. Yes, I said, because lying would only make things worse. Yes, we're infected, but we're aware. We're conscious. We're not like the others. Please, there are children in here. Innocent children. Another pause, longer this time. I could hear voices conferring on the other side, too quiet to make out the words. Sir, I need you to listen very carefully, the voice finally said. The infection is not curable. Everyone who's been exposed will eventually lose control again. What you're experiencing right now is temporary. The consciousness comes and goes, but the hunger always comes back. Always. Do you understand what I'm telling you? No, Sophie whimpered beside me. No, that's not true. We can fight it. We can stay ourselves. But even as she said it, I felt something stirring in my gut. A familiar emptiness. The hunger was waking up again, and I could tell from the way Sophie shifted beside me that she felt it too. How long had we been conscious? An hour? Maybe 2? and already I could feel myself slipping. "My name is Captain Foster," the voice continued. "I have children of my own. 2 girls, 8 and 10. I can't imagine what you're going through right now. But you need to understand the situation. Greater Manchester is gone. The infection spread to over 90% of the youth population in 6 hours. Those who retained consciousness for any period of time, they all lost it again eventually. And when they did, they killed anyone near them. Family, friends, rescue workers, everyone. We're different," I said desperately, even though I could feel the darkness creeping back into my thoughts. "We can control it. We can—" "Dad," Sophie said quietly. Her voice had changed again, going deeper. "Dad, I'm getting hungry again." "No, not yet. Not so soon." "How long?" I asked Captain Foster. "How long do we have before we lose control?" "Based on our observations, anywhere from 10 minutes to 3 hours, but it always comes back. I'm sorry, sir. I truly am." Around me, I could hear the other children starting to shift. Someone was breathing harder, faster. Someone else was whimpering, and it sounded more like an animal than a child. We were all feeling it. The hunger was coming back, stronger this time. "What are you going to do?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "The building is rigged to collapse. We're bringing it down in 5 minutes, sealed basement and all. It'll be quick, painless. You won't suffer." "You're going to bury us alive," a boy's voice said from the darkness. He sounded about 13, and there was anger in his voice, but also resignation. "You're going to murder children." "We're trying to save the world," Captain Foster said, and I could hear the weight in his words. "I know that doesn't make this right. I know you didn't ask for any of this, but if we don't contain the infection here, it spreads to Liverpool, to Birmingham, to London, to the whole of Britain and beyond. Millions will die, maybe billions. I have my orders." "Fuck your orders," the boy shouted. "We're people. We're still people." But were we? I looked down at my hands again, at the blood dried under my fingernails. Clare's blood. I'd killed my wife. I'd enjoyed it. And in a few minutes I'd want to do it again to anyone I could reach. Maybe Captain Foster was right. Maybe this was mercy. "Sophie," I said, pulling her close, "I need you to listen to me, okay? I need you to be brave." "I don't want to die, Daddy," she said, and she was crying again. "I'm scared." "I know, baby. I know. But this way we stay ourselves. We don't hurt anyone else. We don't become those things again." The hunger was growing stronger by the second. My vision was starting to darken at the edges. How much longer did I have? 2 minutes? 1? "I love you," I told Sophie, holding her as tight as I could. "I love you so much. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. I'm sorry I couldn't save you." "I love you too, Daddy," she whispered. The other children were gathering closer now, seeking comfort in their final moments. Some were holding hands. Some were hugging. The teenage boy who'd been angry was now crying quietly. We were all terrified. We were all sorry for what we'd done. But this was the only way it could end. "Charges set," a voice called from outside. "Preparing to detonate. All units fall back." "I'm sorry," Captain Foster said one last time. "God forgive me. God forgive us all." Footsteps retreated rapidly. The building was silent except for our breathing and quiet sobs. I counted the seconds in my head. 10, 9, 8. The hunger roared inside me, demanding to be fed. My vision went completely black and I felt myself starting to slip away again. But I held on to Sophie, held on to this last moment of humanity. 7, 6, 5. "We're going to be okay," I lied to my daughter. "We're going to be—" The explosion was deafening. The ceiling came down all at once. Tons of concrete and steel collapsing into the basement. I felt the impact, felt the crushing weight, and then I felt nothing at all.